They say, if you ever hear your name whispered across the river in Fenghuang after midnight, don't answer, no matter how familiar the voice sounds, because in that old town, not every echo belongs to the living. Fenghuang lies quietly in the southwest of Hunan province, wrapped around the misty Tuojing River like a memory that refuses to fade. The streets are made of slick stones that have tasted too many rainy seasons. Wooden stilt houses lean over the water as if listening to something beneath. Lanterns hang from their balconies, red, trembling, and eternal. Locals say the lanterns never go out, even in storms. They call it a blessing from the ancestors, but the old ones know better. They say each lantern is a prison for a lost soul, and the bridge, the one made of ancient gray stone, stretching from the east quarter to the river market, is where those souls still cross, night after night, seeking the living who dare to look back. It was under that same bridge that a body once floated ashore many years ago. No one claimed it. No one dared to. The villagers whispered that it belonged to a woman who drowned herself after her lover left. Her face, they said, was half-eaten by fish, yet her hands still held a single red ribbon. From then on, every year on the night she died, a red lantern would appear on the bridge, burning with no oil, no wind to sway it, and if anyone tried to put it out, the next morning someone from the village would be found floating face down, eyes wide open on the river's edge. Most people have forgotten that tale now. Tourists flood the town during festivals, chasing the beauty of nostalgia. They take photos, eat glutinous rice dumplings, and buy paper fans with poems they cannot read. They laugh, they drink, they cross the bridge. And maybe once in a while, one of them feels a chill that doesn't belong to the air. Maybe someone hears their own name, slipping through the fog like a sigh. But no one remembers the warning anymore, until one man came, a photographer from Guangzhou. His name was Li Wen. He was known for his night photography, for capturing things the eye barely sees, the reflection of lantern light on water, the ghost of smoke over temples, the loneliness between lights. He said darkness had a soul, and he wanted to show people how it breathed. Li Wen arrived in Fenghuang in late autumn, when the fog sits thick as milk over the river. He came alone, with only his old Nikon, a tripod, and a bag full of film rolls. He checked into a riverside inn called Yuelin Guest House, a place run by an old couple who barely spoke Mandarin. The woman smiled too much. The man never smiled at all. On the first night, Li wandered the empty alleys, chasing reflections. He captured the curve of the bridge, the shimmer of lanterns mirrored on the rippling surface, the soft blur of mist like silk over the water. He thought the town was perfect, peaceful, almost too peaceful. Around midnight, when the air grew colder, he set his camera in the middle of the stone bridge. The mist was so thick he could barely see the other side. Only the red lanterns on the posts remained visible, tiny bleeding eyes in the dark. The river murmured below. Every sound felt stretched and heavy. He waited. He adjusted the lens. He pressed the shutter. Click. The film rolled. He checked the frame. Empty bridge. He smiled. Perfect composition. The symmetry, the light, the mood. It was all there. He took another. Click. And another. Click. But after the fifth photo, he felt something change. A faint vibration beneath his feet. A sound, slow and dragging, like wet footsteps echoing through the fog. He froze. There was no one around. The bridge was empty, silent except for the whisper of water below. He told himself it was the wind, the shifting mist, maybe the river brushing against the stones. Still, he looked behind him. Nothing. Only the mist breathing. He shook his head and took one last picture before heading back to the inn. The old woman was waiting by the door, holding an oil lamp. "You went to the bridge," she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was trembling slightly, though her face stayed kind. Lee nodded. "Yes, beautiful spot for night shots." The old man appeared behind her, expression unreadable. He said something in the local dialect, sharp, clipped like a warning. The woman frowned, then turned back to Li Wen. "It's late. You should not go there again. Not after midnight." Li smiled, thinking she was just superstitious. "I'm fine. It's just fog. I've shot in worse places." But her eyes, they didn't blink. And for a brief moment, he thought he saw the reflection of a lantern flame flicker inside her pupils. That night, Li Wen developed his film in the small dark room the guest house provided. The chemical smell filled the room. He hung the wet photos on the line, watching as shapes emerged slowly from the blankness. Bridge, lanterns, mist, water, all perfect. Until he reached the fifth photo. There, right in the middle of the bridge, was a shadow of a woman, hair down to her waist, dress clinging to her like it was soaked. Her head tilted slightly toward him, her face blurred by fog. And yet, her eyes were open. He could see them, looking straight at him through the photograph. Lee blinked. His heart stuttered. He checked the rest. Nothing. Only that one frame. He looked around the room. Empty, but the air felt heavier, damp, and faintly, so faintly, he thought he heard something outside the window. A woman's voice, soft, calling his name. "Li Wen." He froze. The sound came from the river. He leaned closer to the window, but the fog outside was thick like smoke. Only the reflection of a red lantern burned through it, swaying slightly as if someone was walking below it, carrying it across the bridge. He whispered to himself, "Just the wind," and blew out the candle. But the last thing he saw before the room went dark was that in the reflection on his window glass, the woman in his photograph was standing right behind him. The next morning, the fog had not lifted. It clung to the rooftops, curled around the wooden balconies, and hovered above the river like something alive, a white serpent sleeping between worlds. The townspeople moved quietly, their footsteps muffled on the damp stones. Somewhere down the river, a fisherman's bell tolled once, twice, then fell silent. Li Wen barely slept. The woman's voice had followed him into his dreams, soft, liquid, echoing through water. When he woke, the photograph was still hanging on the line, the figure inside it more visible now, as if time had deepened her presence. The wet film glistened, catching the first pale light of dawn. He stared at it for a long time. Her hair was black as ink, her form thin, almost transparent, and yet her eyes, even blurred, seemed to see. It didn't feel like a trick of exposure. The air in the room was too still, too cold. He touched the photo. The surface was dry, but when he pulled his hand away, his fingertips were damp. At breakfast, the old woman from the guest house served him a bowl of rice porridge. She avoided his eyes. The old man sat in the corner, smoking silently, his gaze fixed on the floor. Li Wen tried to start a conversation. "Do you know the story of the bridge?" he asked gently, half smiling. The spoon in her hand trembled. She looked up, lips pale. "Which story?" "The red lanterns, the woman who drowned." "I heard something like that last night." Her eyes darted toward the door, as if afraid the river might overhear. Then she whispered, "Some stories are not meant for visitors." Li Wen laughed softly. "I'm not easily frightened, Auntie. I photograph the night for a living." She said nothing more, only murmured a short prayer under her breath. The old man muttered something in dialect, harsh, urgent. Then he stood and left the table. The old woman leaned close. "If you took pictures there," she said, voice trembling, "do not keep them in your room. Burn them before the next full moon." Li Wen smiled politely, thanked her, and left. But the words followed him like a fog of their own. That afternoon he went out again. The river was quieter than before. Tourists had vanished with the mist. Only a few vendors lingered by the stone steps, selling trinkets, paper boats, incense sticks, and tiny glass bottles holding folded charms. An old man with a bamboo hat sat near the bridge, weaving nets. His eyes were cloudy, skin tanned by time. When Lee approached, he raised his head and said in a rasping tone, "You're not from here." Lee nodded. "No, I came to photograph the bridge." The man stopped weaving. "You've already done that, haven't you?" Lee frowned. "How do you know?" The old man's gaze drifted toward the river. "Because she follows those who do." Lee waited, heart tightening. "Who?" The old man didn't answer directly. He pointed at the bridge. "That stone path. It was built on bones. The foundation beneath it holds more than rocks. Every time they repaired it, something was added. A hand, a rib, a skull that drifted too close. The river never gives back without taking something." His fingers shook slightly as he tied the knot on his net. "They say there was once a bride who drowned herself here, waiting for a man who never returned. Her lantern kept burning long after her body sank, so they used it as an omen to guide souls across. Since then, the bridge became a crossing, not for people, but for them." The man spat into the river and murmured, "No one should look into the water after midnight. What you see might not be your reflection." Lee thanked him quietly, though his hands were cold. He turned his camera over, fingers tracing its metal body as if to remind himself that he belonged to the world of reason, of light, lens, and time. But that night, reason would mean nothing. He returned to the bridge again. He told himself it was for the art, to capture the truth behind legends. The fog was thicker, heavier, and the lanterns glowed with a strange, steady pulse. Each flame seemed alive, breathing in the mist. He set up his tripod in the exact same spot as before. The river whispered below. The stones beneath him were damp, almost slick with something that smelled faintly of iron. He checked the viewfinder. Nothing unusual. The bridge stretched ahead, empty, perfect. He took a deep breath and pressed the shutter. Click. The sound echoed oddly, like it was swallowed by something unseen. He took another. Click. And another. Click. But then, splash. The sound came from below, from the dark heart of the river. Something had fallen or risen. The water rippled, slow and wide, as if something vast had moved beneath it. Lee leaned over the edge, peering down. A faint light shimmered under the surface, like a lantern burning underwater. It drifted slowly, closer and closer, until it hovered right beneath him. He squinted. The light flickered. And then he saw her, a woman's face, pale, blue-white, eyes open, hair flowing like dark weeds. Her lips moved though no sound came. Then the voice reached him, not through air, but through his bones. Li Wen. He stumbled back, the camera nearly falling. The light vanished. The river was still again. Only the faint sound of dripping water remained. Not from below, but from somewhere on the bridge. He turned. A trail of wet footprints glistened behind him, leading toward the far end. Small, bare, human, each print steaming faintly in the cold air. His breath quickened. He raised the camera, instinctively pressing the shutter again. Click, click, click. The fog rippled like a curtain being drawn aside, and for a heartbeat, he saw her, standing at the very end of the bridge. draped in white, her long hair swaying, her face hidden behind it. The lanterns around her began to flicker wildly, their flames bending toward her shape as if drawn by something invisible. The air grew colder. His hands trembled. He tried to step back, but his feet felt rooted to the stone. Then she lifted her head, and though he couldn't see her face, he knew she was smiling. The wind rose suddenly, scattering the mist, snapping the river into waves. His camera flashed once, a burst of light, and then everything went black. When he opened his eyes, the bridge was empty again. The lanterns burned steady. The fog was gone. He looked at his hand. They were wet, not with water, with something darker. And on the river's surface below, drifting gently away, was a single red lantern, burning without flame. The next evening, rain began to fall. It came softly at first, thin threads of water stitching the mist to the rooftops, then heavier until the river itself seemed to sigh. The streets of Fenghuang emptied. Lanterns burned under the downpour, defying the rain, their red light bleeding into puddles. Li Wen sat inside his room at the Yulin guest house, staring at the stack of photographs laid before him, the first roll from the previous night. He had developed them after sunrise, his hands trembling with every dip into the chemical tray. Out of 12 frames, 5 were perfect. 6 were blurred, distorted by strange shadows, as if the film had been touched by smoke. But the 12th, the last one, was wrong. It showed the bridge, shrouded in mist, empty. Yet in the reflection on the river below, there was a woman, her back turned, her hair long, her outline faint, as though she existed only in the memory of water. He stared for hours, unable to look away. There was something about her posture, the tilt of her head, the shape of her shoulders. It felt familiar, not like a stranger, more like someone who had been standing behind him for a very long time. That evening, the old woman brought him dinner, cold noodles, boiled greens, a teapot of plum wine. She noticed the photographs spread across the table, her face drained of color. "You saw her," she whispered. Li looked up. "Who?" The old woman crossed herself in a gesture older than prayer. "The one from the river." Li gave a tired smile. "You mean the ghost story people tell to tourists?" Her expression didn't change. "She doesn't like being photographed. Each time someone captures her, the river keeps a part of them in return." She pointed at his eyes. "That's why they start to lose their light." He frowned. "What do you mean?" The woman hesitated. Then she took a small hand mirror from her pocket, old and silver framed, and placed it before him. "Look." Li leaned in. His reflection stared back, pale, tired, sleepless. But then he saw it. His pupils, once dark and round, had faint red rings around them, like the reflection of a lantern burning inside. He blinked hard, looked again. The red was gone. He laughed nervously. Just the light. The old woman didn't answer. She took the mirror back and whispered, "If you keep taking pictures, you won't see yourself in any of them." That night, Li Wen dreamed again. He was standing on the bridge, camera in hand. The lanterns swayed though there was no wind. Below, the river was black glass. He took a photo. Click. And from the river, a ripple spread. Slow, wide. Then a hand broke the surface. Pale, slender, reaching upward. He dropped his camera, heart pounding. The hand grabbed the edge of the stone and began to pull. A head rose. Long hair plastered to a face that wasn't quite human anymore. The eyes opened, white, unblinking. The mouth moved soundlessly. Then the voice came, from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Li Wen, you took my path." He tried to step back, but his feet sank into the stones as though the bridge itself was breathing, drawing him in. The woman climbed higher, dripping, her dress merging with the mist. She smiled. Her teeth were small and sharp. "Now you must take my place." He woke with a start, sweat cold on his neck, lungs tight. The room was dark except for the faint glow from the window. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was thick with the smell of the river. He got up, went to the mirror on the wall, and froze. The mirror reflected the room perfectly. The bed, the chair, the photographs pinned to the wall. But where his reflection should have been, there was nothing. No face, no movement, only the faint shimmer of water rippling across the glass. He stumbled back, heart racing, and grabbed his camera. He snapped a picture toward the mirror, flash bright as lightning. When the film rolled out, his hands shook as he held it under the lamplight. The photo showed the mirror again, and this time his reflection had returned. Standing slightly behind him, smiling faintly, eyes open too wide. The next morning, Li Wen went to the Riverside Temple. The locals called it Shui Po Miao, the Temple of the River Soul. Few visited it anymore. The doors were heavy with dust, the incense holders filled with cold ash. An old monk tended the shrine, sweeping slowly, as if sweeping time itself. Li greeted him politely and showed him the photograph. The monk studied it for a long while before speaking. "You have opened a gate," he said. His voice was thin but steady. "This bridge connects more than two shores. It connects longing and death." Li hesitated. "How can I close it?" The monk pointed toward the river. "When the red lanterns are lit, the bridge belongs to the other side. The souls cross back to where they were lost. If you step there alone, the river has already marked you." He walked to the altar and brought back a small folded charm. Paper yellowed with age, ink smudged by use. "Tie this around your wrist and do not go near the water again." Li accepted it, bowing gratefully. But that night, as he returned to the guest house, he saw something that stopped him in his tracks. Along the entire span of the bridge, the lanterns had already been lit, every single one. Even though the wind howled through the valley, none of them flickered. And on the far side of the bridge stood a woman in white, waiting, her face hidden, her body shimmering faintly in the red glow. The charm on his wrist began to burn, hot, then hotter, until the paper turned black and fell to ash. He felt something shift inside him, a pull, deep and cold, dragging at his chest. He couldn't look away. It was as if the river had found its way into his blood. "Li Wen," the voice again, softer this time, almost tender. He stepped forward before realizing he had moved at all. The stones beneath his feet were wet again. Though no rain had fallen, the air shimmered around the lanterns. Each flame bent toward him, like faces leaning closer. He lifted the camera, almost without thinking, and pressed the shutter. Click. The flash lit the mist like lightning, and for an instant, he saw her face. Not drowned, not decayed, but alive, beautiful, smiling as though she had been waiting for him all along. And then, nothing. The flash died. The bridge was empty once more. Only his reflection in the river remained, but it was no longer smiling, and it wasn't looking back. By the fourth night, Li Wen no longer trusted the passing of time. Hours slipped like fog through his fingers, dawn and dusk blending until every moment felt the same shade of gray. The world outside the window seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, slow, steady, uneven. He had stopped eating. The old couple at Yuelin Guest House left trays of food at his door, but the smell of rice and ginger made him nauseous. All he wanted was to develop the new rolls of film. He needed to see. He locked himself inside the small dark room where red light bled through the misted glass. The air was thick with chemicals and humidity. The photos hung in neat rows, dripping slowly, each one a window that refused to close. The first few looked normal. Bridges, lanterns, ripples on the water. But then the faces began to appear, at first only faintly. Shadows that seemed to stand just beyond the mist. Then clearer, outlines of people in traditional clothes, old hairstyles, wide sleeves fluttering in unseen wind. They were not tourists. Their garments belonged to another century, the Qing dynasty, perhaps, or older. In one photograph, a woman held a paper lantern, her head bowed. In another, a child leaned over the bridge's edge, his reflection rippling into nothing. And in all of them, the same pattern. Every figure faced away from the camera, toward the water, as if listening for something beneath the surface. He flipped to the last photograph. There, in the far distance, was himself, unmistakable, standing on the bridge, camera raised. But behind him stood dozens, a crowd of figures, pale and thin, stretching the length of the bridge, their faces hidden, their shapes wavering like smoke. Lee's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't seen anyone that night. He was sure of it. He had been alone. He remembered the silence, the fog, the echo of his own footsteps. Then why did the photo show so many? He stumbled out of the dark room, heart racing. The corridor was empty, but he felt watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind through the shutters made him flinch. He turned on the light, and for a heartbeat, he saw them. Reflections of faces in the window glass, pressed close, watching from the other side. He blinked. They vanished. He decided to confront the old woman. He needed answers. About the bridge, the river, the woman. She was in the courtyard, hanging damp sheets on a line. The mist clung to her hair. "Auntie," he called softly, "who are they? The people in my photographs." Her hands froze mid-air. The cloth fell to the ground. She turned slowly, eyes filled with something like pity or fear. "You should have burned them. Tell me," he insisted, "who are they?" "The forgotten," she said finally. "The ones who died in silence." Her voice trembled as she continued. "Many years ago, this village suffered a flood. Whole families were swept away. Their names lost, their bodies never found. When the water receded, the bridge remained, but it had changed. It became a place where the living and the dead touched for a moment before drifting apart again." She pointed toward the river. The red lanterns were hung to guide their spirits, but now no one tends to them. The souls wander. They are drawn to light, and to those who carry eyes that remember. Lee frowned. "Eyes that remember?" She looked at him for a long, heavy moment. "Your eyes." That night, Lee couldn't resist returning to the bridge once more. The town slept, drowned in fog and rain. Only the sound of the river remained, steady, whispering, alive. He brought no tripod this time, no hesitation. He set the camera to automatic, pressing the shutter again and again, chasing the shapes that moved at the corner of his sight. Each flash illuminated fragments, a sleeve brushing the air, a child's hand reaching for something unseen, a woman's shadow lingering where there should have been none. He stopped to reload the film, and that was when he heard it. Footsteps, not echoing, but following. He turned sharply. A figure stood a few meters behind him. She was dressed in white again, the same as before, but now he could see her face clearly. It was calm, almost gentle. Her skin pale as river stone, her eyes deep and endless. "You see them too," she whispered. Lee swallowed hard. "Who are you?" Her smile was sorrowful. "No one remembers our names. You take our faces. You give us back shape. but you should not have come so often." Her voice echoed strangely, like two tones overlapping, one near, one far, one from beneath the water. "The bridge is hungry," she said. "It feeds on those who look too long." Before he could speak, she turned and walked toward the far end of the bridge, vanishing into the mist. He lowered the camera, but his fingers pressed the shutter again, almost involuntarily. The flash went off. For a fraction of a second, he saw her not as a woman, but as something else. A shape made of mist and current, bones of light and shadow, hair flowing like river weeds. The lanterns flared all at once, as if the night itself had gasps, and the water beneath him began to move. It rose slowly, curling upward, as if the river were reaching back toward him. He stepped away, but the mist coiled around his ankles like fingers, cold and strong. He tried to run. His foot slipped. The camera fell, hitting the stones with a metallic crack, and rolled toward the edge. For an instant, he saw its lens reflecting not the bridge, not the sky, but faces beneath the water, countless, pale, open-eyed. And then, silence. The next moment, he was standing at the other end of the bridge, drenched in sweat, lungs burning. He didn't remember how he got there. The river was calm again. His camera was gone. He stumbled back to the inn, collapsing on the floor, trembling violently. When he looked at his reflection in the window, his eyes glowed faintly red, the same shade as the lanterns. The following day, he went to retrieve the camera. He found it lying at the foot of the bridge, dry despite the rain. When he checked the film, all 12 frames had already developed inside. Though that was impossible, he held them against the light. Each one showed the bridge from a distance, bathed in red mist. And in every frame, he was there, standing, staring into the river. In the final image, his reflection in the water was gone. Only the woman in white remained. That night, the old man from the guest house came to his room without knocking. He spoke few words, voice low and brittle. "Leave before the 7th night," he said. "If you stay, she will cross with you." Lee looked up from the photographs. His face was hollow, eyes red-rimmed, smile faint. "She already has," he whispered. The old man said nothing. He only bowed his head and left the door open behind him. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of the river's breath and the soft whisper of a woman's voice, calling Li Wen's name again, from both sides of the bridge at once. The mist was thicker that night, not a haze anymore, but a curtain, almost solid, that muffled sound and drowned light. The bridge ahead glowed faintly, its red lanterns wavering like dying eyes. The river below was still, heavy as glass. Min crossed the cobblestones slowly, his tripod tucked under one arm. Every sound was swallowed, the crunch of his shoes, the low hum of the wind. Even his own breathing seemed foreign. He reached the middle of the bridge. The air here always felt heavier. He adjusted the lens. The camera clicked, and again, click, click, click. Each flash captured a moment no longer his. He lowered the camera and looked at the small screen. His breath stopped. In every photo, a figure walked past behind him, just at the edge of the frame. A woman in pale robes, her face blurred, her hair floating as if underwater. He turned. The bridge was empty. Only the soft ripple of the river answered him. He took another photo. Click. The preview appeared. She was closer now. Her feet were not touching the stones. Min exhaled slowly, pressing his tongue against the roof of his mouth to keep from trembling. The old man's words came back to him. "If you see a red light where none should be, don't cross the bridge." And yet here he was. He turned the camera off. The mist seemed to throb, breathing with him. He started to walk, one step, then another. But the bridge did not end. He glanced back. The entrance was gone, swallowed by the fog. He tried to run, but every stride echoed the same. One step too many, one step too far, and yet he remained in the middle. Click, a sound not from his camera. He turned his head sharply. A lantern had flickered to life behind him, a single red flame swaying. Then another, then another. The line of lanterns lit themselves in sequence, stretching backward into the white void. Min raised his camera again, his hands shaking. Through the lens, the bridge looked different. The stones were wet, darker, and in the river below, countless faces floated upward, eyes open, mouths moving soundlessly. He dropped the camera. It didn't fall. It hung there, suspended in the air, as if caught by unseen hands. He backed away, his heel scraping against the stone edge. The river below seemed to call, whispering in the same voice he'd heard before, the voice that spoke his name in the mist. Min! He spun around. The voice was behind him now, soft, almost pleading. You took our light. Give it back. A hand emerged from the fog, pale, dripping, its fingers reaching toward the lens. Then another hand, and another. They climbed up the railing, slow and deliberate, like the dead waking from a long sleep. Min stumbled backward, heart pounding. His breath came out in ragged bursts. He grabbed his camera, yanked it away from the air. It was icy cold. The screen flickered to life on its own, showing live feed. Not the bridge before him, but the reflection below. The same bridge inverted, filled with people walking silently beneath the water. Dozens of them, hundreds. Their eyes glowed faintly red, each one reflecting the lanterns above. And at the center of them all, the woman in white. Her head tilted slowly, as though hearing his heartbeat. Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear, until suddenly the sound broke through like a whisper from inside his own skull. Do not look down. He froze, but curiosity is its own curse. He looked. The reflection had changed. The people were gone. Only one remained, himself, standing beneath the water, camera in hand, staring upward at his own body. The figure beneath smiled and raised his camera. Click. A flash erupted, white and blinding, swallowing the bridge, the river, the sky. When the light faded, Min was kneeling, trembling, his hands empty. His camera lay by the railing, its lens cracked. The lanterns above had all gone out, except one still burning, swaying gently. He picked up the camera. The screen was black. He turned it over and found something new carved into its metal body. Not scratches, but words. You crossed twice. The mist stirred. The river below rippled softly, reflecting only darkness. He tried to run, but his legs refused. His shadow, or what he thought was his shadow, moved differently. It lingered a step behind, slower, heavier, almost hesitant. He did not dare look back again. When he finally stepped off the bridge, the roosters crowed faintly somewhere beyond the fog. Morning had come. The village was waking. But for him, time had stopped somewhere between those lanterns. He would later check his photos, and every image, every shot was the same. Not the bridge, not the river, only faces, reflected faces, looking up from beneath the water. And in the final one, the last picture he didn't remember taking, he was there too. Standing in the middle of the bridge, holding his camera, eyes blank, face pale, watching himself. The lantern above him still burned red. By the next day, Min's hands still trembled. The camera rested on the wooden table of his small inn-room, face down, as though it might bite. He hadn't slept. The mist hadn't lifted. The innkeeper, an elderly woman with hair as white as paper, watched him quietly from the doorway as he poured another cup of tea that had long gone cold. She said nothing for a long while, then softly, "You went to the bridge last night." He looked up. Her eyes didn't accuse. They pitied. Min didn't answer. He didn't need to. The woman sighed, stepping closer, her footsteps barely making sound on the old wood. "I told you, the bridge doesn't like to be looked at after dark. It remembers the drowned." "The drowned?" he asked, voice hoarse. She nodded, her gaze distant, as if seeing a memory that wasn't hers. Before the village became what it is today, the river ran wild. 1,000 years ago, maybe more. There was a flood, and an entire market was swept away. The bridge you crossed was built over the bones of those who couldn't leave. She placed a single oil lantern on the table. The flame flickered weakly. They say when the bridge was rebuilt, the workers found hair tangled between the stones. A woman's hair, black as night. They couldn't pull it free. Every time they tried, the river rose higher, like it was angry. So they sealed it inside the bridge, poured molten lead over it, and prayed. But lead cannot silence the dead. Min listened, his fingers cold. Who was she? No one knows her name anymore, the innkeeper said. Only that she waited for someone who never returned. Each night she carried a red lantern across the bridge, calling his name. And when the flood came, she didn't run. She followed the light into the water. The flame of the lantern flickered. For a moment it seemed to lean toward him. Now, the woman continued, any lantern left burning after midnight, they say it's hers, and whoever crosses while her light still burns, their reflection belongs to her. Min stared at the camera. The crack in the lens looked like a spider web. Beneath the glass, faintly, he thought he saw something move, like a ripple or a pulse. He swallowed. I saw her, he whispered. She looked at me through the water. The innkeeper's expression darkened. Then she saw your soul too. Her words hung in the room like incense smoke, heavy, inevitable. That night he couldn't resist. He opened his laptop, connected the camera, and waited for the images to load. The screen glowed softly in the dark. Dozens of photos appeared, blurred and tinted with the color of old blood. Each one seemed to shimmer faintly, as though the river itself moved within the pixels. He zoomed into one frame, the shot taken right before the flash. The woman in white stood at the center, but her face was no longer blurred. She was smiling. Her eyes, two hollow pools, stared straight into his. He leaned closer. There was writing on her sleeve, faint and slanted. He adjusted the contrast. Words emerged, carved in red ink. Return the light. The next second, the image flickered. The smile widened. The woman's hand lifted. Slow, deliberate. Her finger pointed not to the camera, but to the reflection in the water beneath her. A single red lantern floated there, untouched by wind. He exhaled shakily. The air in his room felt thicker, colder. From outside, the faint sound of dripping water echoed through the alley. Slow, rhythmic, like footsteps. Drip, drip, drip. He rose, moving to the window. The mist outside pulsed faintly with a glow of red. There on the bridge, far in the distance, a lantern had lit itself again. He could see it through the fog, a heartbeat of color in a world drained of life. Without realizing it, he grabbed his coat, his camera. Something inside him whispered that he needed to go. Not out of curiosity this time, but obligation. The river was calling. He walked through the empty street. The shops were closed, their doors nailed shut. Even the stray dogs were gone. Only the sound of the river remained, a low, mournful hum. As he neared the bridge, The fog swallowed everything but the light ahead. The red lantern swayed gently as though waiting for him. He hesitated at the entrance. His reflection in the river below flickered. For a moment it wasn't him, it was her, the woman in white, holding his camera. He stepped forward anyway. Every instinct screamed to stop, but his feet kept moving. The air smelled of iron and wet stone. The lantern's flame did not waver. It burned steady, unnatural. Beneath it, the river rippled, faint shapes moving just below the surface. He lifted his camera. "If you want it," he whispered to the mist, "come take it." For a long time, nothing moved. Only the faint lap of water against stone. Then the river breathed. The flame brightened. The mist curled upward like fingers. And beneath the bridge, something began to rise. Slow, deliberate, as if the world itself resisted it. A pale shape broke the surface. A face first, then long strands of black hair that clung like seaweed. Her eyes opened, reflecting the red light. She looked at him, not with hatred, not even with sorrow, but with longing. "Return the light," she said again, though her lips never moved. Min raised the lantern, realizing suddenly that its flame had spread. His hands glowed red, his veins illuminated like cracks in porcelain. The bridge groaned beneath him, old wood shifting, stone weeping. The woman lifted her hand, the same gesture as in the photograph. A single drop of water fell from her fingertip to the river below, and every lantern in the village flared to life at once. From every window, every alley, red light filled the mist like blood. And in that instant, he understood. The bridge was not a path for the living. It was a mirror, a gate, a debt. He dropped the lantern into the river. The light vanished beneath the current, swallowed whole. Silence. Then slowly, the mist began to clear. The woman's face faded, her hand lingering a moment longer before dissolving into the black water. Only one lantern remained, floating downstream. Its glow flickered once, then went out. Min stood there, trembling. The bridge beneath him was wet, not with rain, but with something that smelled faintly of salt and time. He turned to leave, but before he could take a step, he saw his reflection once more. Still standing where he'd been, camera in hand, unmoving. The reflection smiled and lifted the camera. Click. When Min awoke, the world was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes you feel smaller than air itself. His room was dim. The curtains hadn't been drawn, yet the dawn outside carried no light, just a pale gray that seeped through the walls like breath. For a moment, he didn't remember how he got there. The last thing he recalled was the bridge, the red glow, the woman's face, the final flash of his reflection. He sat up. His camera lay on the bedside table, clean, dry. The crack in the lens was gone. Something was wrong. He turned the camera on. It powered instantly, humming softly as if newly born. The screen glowed faintly, showing a single file, unnamed, no timestamp. He opened it. It was a video. The angle was wrong. It wasn't shot from his hands, but from behind him. The image showed Min standing on the bridge, dropping the lantern into the river. And then, standing still, for too long, as though waiting for something. A minute passed, then two, and then he turned around. The Min in the video turned directly toward the camera. His eyes were dark, bottomless. When he smiled, the corners of his lips trembled as if the muscles had forgotten how. "Return the light," the recording whispered, though his lips barely moved. The screen flickered. The image bent, folded, and for a split second, he saw his own room, himself sitting on the bed, watching the video. Before the screen went black, he dropped the camera. The knock came immediately. 3 slow knocks on the door. Tock, tock, tock. He froze. The innkeeper's voice followed, quiet, almost apologetic. You shouldn't have gone there twice, Min swallowed. How did you? The river never returns what it takes, she said through the door. You left something behind last night. It's waiting to take what remains. He stood, heart pounding. What did I leave? A pause, then, your reflection. The words sank like stones. Outside the window, the fog pressed closer, turning the glass milky white. In the reflection, he thought he saw something move. A faint silhouette standing where he should be, but slightly delayed. He lifted his hand. The shadow lifted as a heartbeat later. He turned his head. The reflection did not. A chill climbed his spine. He backed away from the glass. His own eyes, or what pretended to be them, followed him with a slow, unnatural precision. And then it smiled. The window pane shuddered. Thin cracks spread outward from the center, branching like veins. He stumbled backward as the reflection reached forward, a pale hand pressing against the inside of the glass, leaving behind a smear of black water. He ran to the door, yanking it open. The hallway beyond was empty, lined with walls that seemed to breathe. The air was cold and damp, heavy with the smell of river mud. The innkeeper was gone. He moved quickly down the stairs, but with each step, the sound echoed too long, as though bouncing down a tunnel. The world outside had lost its color. Everything was the same washed-out gray, and the river sang somewhere beneath it all. By the time he reached the street, he was already shaking. The mist was thicker now, heavy enough to swallow shapes and voices. Somewhere in the distance, a single lantern still burned. Faint, uncertain. He walked toward it. The bridge was gone. Or maybe it was never there to begin with. The river stretched endlessly, smooth as a mirror, the sky above it exactly the same shade. No horizon, no line. Just reflection upon reflection. He lifted his camera. The lens showed him the world as it was, but flipped. The sky below, the water above, and at the center of it all, the woman in white walking across the upside-down bridge, her bare feet leaving ripples that spread into nothing. Behind her came another figure, himself. The reflection moved with perfect confidence, as if it had been walking longer than he had been alive. And when it reached the midpoint of the bridge, it stopped and looked up, straight into him. The camera flickered, static buzzing faintly in his ears. "Stop it," he whispered. "You're not real." But the reflection smiled, tilting its head. It raised the camera in its hands. Click. He dropped his own, clutching his chest. For a brief instant, his breath vanished, as though the air had been pulled from his lungs. The river's surface rippled once, and then, from within the lens at his feet, something began to pour out. Not light, but water. Thick, black, smelling of decay. It spread across the ground, slow and deliberate, forming shapes that almost looked like hands, faces, mouths. Whispers filled the air, thousands of them, speaking at once, layering over one another until they became a single voice. "Return, the light." He stumbled backward, eyes wide. "I did! I threw it into the river." The whispers stopped, and then softly, another voice, her voice unanswered. "You threw it into me." The water rose, swallowing his shoes, his knees, his waist. The mist pressed close, warm and damp, like breath against skin. The reflection in the water tilted its head again, and now it was no longer smiling. It looked hungry. Min struggled, the camera slipping from his grasp, sinking beneath the surface. He could see it glowing faintly as it went down, the light spreading like a pulse through the black current. He gasped. and the river answered with a sound like laughter. A red lantern drifted past, its reflection splitting into two. The second flame burned beneath the surface. He reached out desperately for the floating light, but the moment his fingers brushed it, the flame went out. Darkness, silence, and then, slowly, the reflection in the water opened its eyes again. He could still move, still breathe, but his body felt distant, weightless. He looked down and saw his own hands moving in the water, not above it. He had crossed over, and on the bridge his reflection stood, perfectly still, watching him sink. They say dawn always comes to the village, but on that morning, there was no sunrise, only a dim gray shimmer that hovered between light and dark, between memory and dream. The villagers woke to silence. The mist still clung to the rooftops, and the river lay still as a mirror, perfectly flat, reflecting the pale red hue of the lanterns that had never gone out. Only one thing had changed. The bridge was wet, though it hadn't rained. No one saw Min again after that night. The innkeeper told those who asked that he'd left before sunrise, camera slung across his shoulder, walking toward the northern road. But those who crossed the bridge in daylight whispered something else, that sometimes, just as the morning fog lifted, they could see a shadow standing at the midpoint, a man motionless, facing the water, holding something that glinted faintly in the weak sun. And sometimes, the shadow raised its hand as if taking a picture. The villagers stopped crossing after dusk. Boats began to dock farther upstream, and yet, even when the bridge was abandoned, the lanterns kept burning. No one lit them. No one dared to put them out. It was the innkeeper who noticed it first, the change in the flame. It wasn't fire anymore, but something heavier, thicker, like liquid light. It pulsed faintly, as if with a heartbeat. And if you stared too long into it, you could see shapes moving, faces floating beneath the glow. Some said they recognized him, the photographer, his eyes wide and still, looking up through the flame as though trapped inside. Others said it wasn't him anymore, that the face kept changing, that it took the shape of anyone who dared to look too long. The bridge became forbidden. The villagers began leaving offerings at its ends, rice wine, incense, and strands of red thread. At night, they tied small mirrors facing outward, so no reflection could escape. The innkeeper grew older, frailer, but she kept the same ritual every year on the anniversary of the flood, lighting a single lantern and setting it afloat. She would whisper, "For those who cross twice," before letting it drift downstream. One winter evening, decades later, a young man arrived in the village. He carried a camera. He said he was writing about forgotten places, about folk tales swallowed by time. The villagers warned him. He smiled politely, said he didn't believe in ghosts, and rented the same room at the inn, the one that faced the river. That night, as the clock struck midnight, the mist thickened again. The innkeeper, too old to move, simply closed her eyes and prayed. Outside, the sound of water began, faint at first, then louder, rushing, whispering. A red glow filled the fog, blooming like blood and water. The young man's voice was heard once, a startled gasp, then silence. In the morning, the mist was gone. The bridge stood as it always had. The river flowed quietly. But there were two lanterns now, burning side by side. The villagers knew what it meant. One for the drowned, one for the taker. The bridge had claimed another reflection, and the curse continued. In old folklore from Western Hunan, there is a saying, "The water keeps no names, but it remembers faces." And they say reflections are not just shadows of light, but fragments of soul, tethered to the moment your gaze meets the surface. And if the soul looks back, you are already halfway gone. When a traveler stops by the village now, the guides tell them politely to cross only during the day, never when the red lanterns are lit. Most listen, some don't. One foreign blogger years later wrote that she saw a man standing in the fog, right where the bridge met the middle of the river. He was holding a camera, its lens pointed at her, though no flash came. She took her own photo, thinking it was part of a festival. When she checked her gallery later, every picture was blank, except one. A reflection, a man in white robes, his face half hers, half someone else's. And behind him, a single red lantern, burning under the water. Sometimes when the fog descends on Fenghuang and the river turns silent, the villagers still hear the faint click of a camera echoing through the mist. They say it happens only once a year, on the same night at the same hour. A whisper rises from the water, a red light flickers beneath the bridge, and then softly a voice, neither man nor woman, calls out from the dark, "Do not look down." The tourists laugh, pretending not to shiver, but when they go home and check their photos, one image always appears that they don't remember taking. A pale figure on the bridge, lantern in hand, smiling faintly. The flame in the picture never goes out, even if you delete it. And so the warning remains, passed quietly from villager to traveler, from elder to child, like a small prayer meant to hold the river back. If you find yourself in Fenghuang and the night is clear, do not cross the stone bridge after midnight. If you must, never stop in the middle, never look at the water, and if a red lantern sways before you, turn back, because the bridge remembers, and the drowned remember too. Their faces live in their reflections. Their souls cling to the light. And somewhere beneath the dark water of that ancient river, a man still walks beside a woman in white, their lantern glowing red in the eternal night, neither alive nor dead, but forever crossing. The lantern never died. It simply moved from the river to your eyes. So if tonight, as you scroll in silence, the screen flickers and the reflection of your own face moves a heartbeat too late, you already know why.